Saturday View on Midlands 103. With thanks to Lumclean Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LumcleanEnergy.com. Have your say. Call 0818 300 103. Text or WhatsApp your Saturday View to 083 3010 103.
And a very good morning to you all. Ronan Berry here. It's time for Saturday View here on Midlands 103 083 3010 103. In case you need a reminder of it, text and WhatsApp number. Give us a call either 0818 300 103. Talk to Nelly there, and if you've got an opinion you'd like to air, we might even bring you on and let you air that opinion. So, what have I got for you to sink your teeth into this kind of muggy summer morning, isn't it? It's warm but a little bit damp and drizzly. So, throw on the teapot, throw on the kettle, throw on a coffee, sit back and get involved, because today we'll be talking about the leader funding that's been announced for County Laois. So Laois Partnership Company will be administering that fund as well. It's a pot of around €4 million, and many organisations and companies have made fantastic use of that funding over the last number of years. So they launched their new programme just last week. Brian Kelly, Rural Development Programmes Manager with Laois Partnership Company, will be along a little bit later to tell us exactly what that funding goes towards, how it's been utilised over the years, and more importantly, how you can get involved in that too. Firearms, says you. Why am I mentioning firearms, and in particular guns? Well, in the last week alone, we've seen an assassination attempt on a former US president and current presidential candidate by a 20-year-old. Says you, how can a 20-year-old get their hands on an assault rifle? Well, apparently quite easily in the United States, but also get that close physically and that close in terms of actually the shot that you're talking millimetres could have ended a man's life. It did kill, unfortunately, another innocent attendee at that rally as well. So staggering. But this morning, we're going to do a kind of a comparative. And it's shocking. I'm going to tell you that straight away. Because the Irish Times this week posted a graphic showing statistics around the level of gun ownership by adults in the United States. And it was, as I say, staggering. So we've done a comparison and looked at the population numbers of the counties, Laois, Offaly and Westmeath, and equated to what it would look like if we had similar attitudes, laws, and indeed approaches to gun ownership in the three counties. And as I say, the figures they're frightening. They're absolutely frightening. And it's probably a place we will never go. And I certainly hope we never go there. So we're going to look at gun ownership from, an Irish perspective as well. And, look at who owns guns, why they might own them, the licensing process around that. But also we're going to get some insights from a police officer in the US, because it's a totally different culture. It's something they grew up with. It's kind of an innate part of being an American, and certainly the stats published in the Irish Times this week would support that. So we're just going to have that little kind of deep dive into that and put that hypothetical thing out there, that scenario of if we had a similar approach in the Midlands, what that might look like and what the numbers associated that would be as well. So as always, 083 3010 103 is a text and WhatsApp number if you wish to get in touch this morning. But I'm going to start with a different set of statistics, and statistics that aren't really changing. Actually, they're getting worse and worse week on week and month on month and nearly day by day as well. And we've touched on this on the show just a few short months ago. We had an in-depth discussion with a senior trauma surgeon, with a professional driver, and even a local councillor. And we spoke about road traffic deaths. And even on that show, we spoke about the other consequences like serious injuries that are having life-changing effects on people too. But so far, and this is the latest figure I have, and I probably won't be surprised, unfortunately, if somebody texts in and say there's been another one or two since, but 108 people have died on our roads this year so far, a 17% increase from last year. What we're now seeing, though, is some statistics about 2023 beginning to emerge. And one that was quite shocking from this week was that 15 learner drivers were involved in fatal crashes in 2023. And more crucially, 93%, that's 14 out of 15 of those learner drivers were unaccompanied without a fully licensed driver as required by law. And if you want to put that into kind of harsher statistics, that's a 500% increase in fatal crashes involving learner drivers since 2019. So this is not to point the blame at a section of society. This is to open up a discussion, and I welcome your opinion on this too, around what do we need to do? So the rest of us who are not learner drivers can't just turn around and start blaming them. We all have to re-examine what we're doing. I'm conscious we may have been here before and had a similar discussion, but what is going to change? What steps are we going to take to reduce this? So 108 people, and I say that with a with a qualification. There may be more since I found that figure yesterday. That's the reality of what we live in. 108 people, and we're only on the 20th of July already. It's clearly not good enough, and it's not right. Now, I'm conscious that if you look at global stats, Ireland is not the worst. I think it ranked a year or two ago as probably the ninth least number of road deaths per 100,000 people population, which, again, it's still 108 people so far this year, 108 families that have been torn apart too. But on that thing around learner drivers, I'd like to be joined by Joe Wynne from Wynne School of Motoring, based here in Tullamore. And we're going to look, because many of us have been through that scenario where we've done, maybe some of you might not have had to do a theory test, but you probably had a provisional licence, you became that learner driver, and some of us drove for a certain period of time on a provisional licence. We had our L plates on our car. We were supposed to have an accompanied driver with us. Many people didn't. It was kind of seen as, look, nobody really checks on that. But it's meant to be the case now. So let's get right up to speed with what the current process is when you pass your driving test, because I know when I did mine, I could have literally just jumped in the car and headed for Dublin onto the M50, even if I'd only ever driven on country roads around Laois Offaly and Westmeath and maybe not gone near towns or major intersections or junctions. So clearly not a great process, but it worked for a point. What's the latest on that? Joe, tell us what happens now. When somebody comes to you, go through the series of lessons, pass their driver test, are they allowed to just go out on their own?
Good morning. Once somebody passes their driving test and they go to the NDLS office, either online or they go down to the office and they hand in their pass sheet. Once they produce that and they have a full licence in hand, a physical licence in hand, they are eligible to drive on the road just as you and I or any fully licensed driver. There's one caveat. A newly qualified driver is referred to as a novice driver. And that's why they wear the end plates, or they're supposed to display the end plates on their car for the following 2 years. During this 2-year period, they are not classified as a qualified driver for a learner driver, and their penalty points are not 12, but 7. They go from 6 on a learner permit, you can gain 7 on a novice permit. But your point is, are they entitled to drive out on a motorway and drive for Dublin? Yes, is the answer at present. We are currently getting data and information which has been correlated between the Garda Síochána and the RSA, and that is giving us more and more information about fatalities and about accidents and about speed limits and what we believe may be the probable causes of accidents. And the truth is that not just learner drivers or novice drivers, but every driver has a role to play in this. I hate to be the bearer of more bad news. We're actually at 109 deaths as of 9 a.m. this morning. The Garda Síochána have just their figures published
and that's more. It's very hard to keep a track because it does keep rising.
It's so right. Yeah.
And when I had looking at notes yesterday for this, it was something like 103 was in the UC. And I said before I came on, I better just check and see what it is. And there we go, 109 already. So, but the process like that we have for training drivers, and it's more extensive than when I did my test, where you're mandatory lessons at this point to get you prepped for it. People are clearly passing their driving tests. What's happening then? I suppose people are going to say, right, enforcement. It's not being enforced, but it's also not the remit of on Garda to spend all their time looking to see our learner or novice drivers, have they got an accompanied driver in them? How do we try and get people to take responsibility for these things? That's, I guess, the question.
Everybody has a role to play. Everybody from the learner driver to the novice driver, every driver has a role to play in this. How do we see it every day. People turn up for lessons and they arrive in their own car. They don't have a qualified driver with them. This happens at driving test centres. They'll go in, they'll take their test. We have 30,000 people on their third or subsequent learner permit. We have thousands of people not turning up every year for driving tests, simply saying they have a piece of paper saying they booked a test and they're entitled to get. There has to be changes made within the driving laws and regulations. Obviously, it's natural. If you drive out the road today and head back towards Tullamore and you see a speed camera in an area, you automatically slow down. If you see a checkpoint, it automatically gets in your frame of mind and your frame of driving differently. Automatically. Yes, I won't say more policing, but those actions and the speed camera vans, the Gatso vans, they change how we drive when we see them. And a more visible approach is always better for safer roads and safer driving. We have 21 pedestrians. I know that in Offaly County Council this month, the council informed that they're going to be changing the speed limits on roads in Offaly, and all 80 kilometre speed limits will go to 60 kilometres. Now, I am not in favour of a mandatory blanket. I'm not in favour of a mandatory blanket drop speed limits. I'm in favour of targeted speed limit reductions in areas where accidents occur. I'm in favour of town centres, the immediate town centres in the likes of Mullingar, Athlone, Portlaoise, Tullamore, in the town centre, that there would be focused reductions in speed from 50 to 30 in the immediate town centres, because we have 21 pedestrians who have been knocked down and killed on our roads this year alone.
Yeah.
Targeted measures I'm all in favour of.
Yeah, I think when it comes to those speed limits, and it's been regularly touted about the M50, that if you had those more reactive ones that told you what speed to drive at, the system actually flows a lot better. I would argue the same with a lot of our country roads. People are trying to drive at 100. They're getting they're getting up behind that truck or that tractor or that car turning quicker. They're then causing a concertina effect of a tailback. Whereas if everybody travels at 80 or be at 60, it probably is a better, smoother system. I think the question, and people are beginning to ask us by text, where are people going in such a hurry all the time? I think that's, and I know one thing that's in constantly in the news is in the local papers again this week is the N52 past Durrow, particularly at the National School. And there's a road, if ever, should be dropped to at least 80. Yeah. And it's a road that is extremely dangerous for people taking that turn. And I know this from personal experience, but when it slows down, when the traffic is calmer, and often sometimes a guy maybe in an articulated lorry might slow a little bit, and it allows the traffic to flow and takes away a lot of the risk and hazard. It's very solvable, but yet it's at 100 and people expect to be able to go 100 over that hill irrespective, because they don't know there's a school turn off or there's a community hall there. But again, loads of texts already, mobile phones, speed and attitude, but mobile phones keeps coming in there. Yeah. I'm sure you're not teaching people to drive with a mobile phone in their hand.
Obviously not. And mobile phones is the biggest, I would say it would be the biggest cause of accidents with speed. People using their mobile phone, driving on their mobile phone, checking Instagram, checking Facebook, checking TikToks, going through things, Snapchatting,
YouTube, putting on music, Spotify, whatever.
Look, we are all guilty. There's nobody here who's going to say they're the perfect driver. Everybody can learn from this. Sadly, we are on course for over 200 people passing away on our roads this year. As you say, there are areas, and you give a great example in the at the hill in Durrow as you approach, where a speed reduction will be welcomed. But we are all responsible. I would advise, if I can give one piece of advice to families who are bringing their children out on the roads for the first time. Firstly, like your texters are saying, where are you going in such a hurry? People are going to make mistakes. Learner drivers are going to make mistakes. It's the nature of learning to drive. But one piece of information I would give to people, and when I was being assessed by the RSA only 6 months ago, the driving tester who was testing me said to me, if I give you one piece of information, it is the last word that you say is the most important word you say. So if you're driving with your son or your daughter, and we're focusing on learner drivers and novice drivers here, and they're driving and they're too close to, let's say, the left-hand side, and if you keep saying, keep out of the ditch, keep out of the ditch, keep out of the, all they hear is ditch. So naturally the reaction is to go towards the ditch. Whereas if you just say, move to the right, they hear the word right, they'll move to the right, it'll be safer for them. Everybody has a role to play in this.
Yeah, and there's kind of a behavioural aspect of that, like that you can't action a not, don't not do that, or keep out. So that's quite interesting in that language too. Can I ask you a very quick question, Joe? What was your first car?
I had a 1.2 litre Opel Corsa.
Geez, I think I had a 1.1 or
1.2 litre Opel Corsa.
I would say if we got a lot of people to text in about somebody's first car now, it could easily be a 2 litre, possibly a 3 litre high performance car.
Can I make one point as a driving instructor? only this week, all motor insurance companies, they won't say this, but if you drive a 1.5 litre car or more, that is where your insurance premium will rise rapidly. If you are going to look to buy your child or somebody is going to buy a car, if it's 1.5 litre or less, you have a greater chance of paying less on your insurance. It every day. Oh, I'm going to buy a Volkswagen Golf, it's 1.6. I'm going to buy a 1.9 litre Jetta. And I'm just making those. But as you say, it's the size of the engine.
There's so many 10, 12, 15-year-olds, what would have been high-performance cars in their day, your Audis, your Beamers, your Mercs on the road. Yeah. And again, we've loads of texts coming in there saying as well, it's not just the young people. And I'm very adamant that we're making that point. We're just looking at this because those stats have been released this week. To finish up, I'm going to bring to the World Health Organization. They have a document online. It's their Global Status Report on Road Safety in 2023. You can go online, download it. But in the opening statement to it there, it kind of puts it in very plain terms. It says the Global Status Report on Road Safety shows the number of annual road traffic deaths has fallen slightly to 1.19 million. This is globally, of course, as well. It says the report shows that efforts to improve road safety are having an impact and that significant reductions in road traffic deaths can be made if proven measures are applied. The next line I found particularly striking. Despite this, the price paid for mobility remains too high. And I think that is the point of all this. We take too much for granted. We've too much entitlement with our cars, with our behaviours, with our approaches on the road. I couldn't even count probably on two hands the number of people I saw on mobile phones, on roundabouts, on main roads, overtaken in the past couple of days alone. So think of that statement. Despite this, the price paid for high mobility for mobility remains too high. Very hard to disagree. 109 road deaths in this country. 20th of July kind of says it all. Joe, as always, thank you so much for that. You can find Joe, of course, on Wynne School of Motoring. Time for a quick break. After that, we're going to look about gun statistics, gun ownership, and throw out there and see what would it look like if we had similar levels of gun ownership in Laois Offaly and Westmeath as currently is in the United States as well. So some really interesting stats coming up. But right now across the Midlands, it's 14 degrees.
Saturday View on Midlands 103 with thanks to Lumcloon Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. lumcloonenergy.com.
The whole issue of guns and gun ownership very much in a lot of our minds over the past week or 10 days with the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump and current election candidate over there, really millimetres away from his life. And unfortunately, one person lost her life at that rally last week and other people were left seriously injured from it. A 20-year-old with an AR rifle was able to get onto a roof within 100 metres of the former president and almost take his life. And it begs the question, number one, how did he get the gun that easily and how was he able to be such a precise shot on that? But again, this isn't an unfamiliar story. It's definitely more newsworthy and that because of whom that the victim was. But it's a common enough story. And if we talk about things like mass shootings in the States, we kind of get immune to those stories, unfortunately, irrespective of how many people are involved. Also, this week, though, in Longford, there was a suspected drive-by shooting where a 70-year-old man was injured when his shot was fired through his window. And so, yes, we know there are guns around the Midlands, and we certainly know there are guns in the States. But Irish Times produced a graphic this week, and it said that some 81.4 million Americans, that's 31.9% of all adults in the United States, own more than 415 million firearms. So let's do a quick calculation and equate that back, that if we had the same laws and the same approach and same attitudes towards firearm and gun ownership in Laois Offaly and Westmeath, what might that look like? Well, very simply, Census 2022 will give you the stats you need in terms of the population of, say, Laois at night, just over 91,000, Offaly 83,000, Westmeath just over 96,000 people. You can then dig a bit deeper and find the adult population. So the adult population of the three Midlands counties comes to around 192,896 people based on Census 2022 stats. Now, if we were to equate that 31.9% of those adults were firearm owners, that gives us a total of, and say each of them owns the average of 5, which would be the American average. If 81.4 million people own 415 firearms, we're going to give it an average of 5.1 firearms per person. So 192,000, almost 193,000 adults by 5 firearms would mean that in Laois Offaly and Westmeath there would be at almost 310,000 legally held firearms just in the 3 counties alone. So That's more than the population. That's over 271,000 people is the total population from of all ages. Could you imagine 310,000 firearms floating around our society? Now, information I could find from some online sources around the actual licences issued for the three counties suggests that last year there was around 4,600 licences for firearms, and that includes things like crossbows and air rifles too, within the three counties as well. So very, very low numbers. And yes, it's very hard to see that ever really changing or getting any bigger. So the question this morning is what if? And I suppose first let's get a perspective of somebody from the Midlands who lives in the United States and indeed is very suitably qualified to comment on this. His name is Mark Kirwan. He's from Roscrea and he's a Metropolitan Police Officer in Washington, D.C. And to the miracle of modern technology, I think it's about 5:30 in the morning.
From the Midlands
Mark
who lives in the United States and indeed is very suitably qualified to comment on this. His name is Mark Kirwan. He's
a bit of a delay in it. Morning, Mark. Can you hear me, Mark?
Yeah, how are you doing, Ronan?
I say very good morning, actually. Good and early over in the States at present.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, nice and early, all right.
No bother, but thank you so much for joining us. You're quite a while in the States at this point as well. At what point did you join the police force over there?
I joined right after 9/11, so I was like 21 years with the police department. So it was basically 9/11 was the big instigator for making me join, at the time.
And so quite a different, from your own experience, having lived down in Tipperary, quite a different experience, I'd imagine, joining the American police force versus an Garda Síochána.
Yeah, I mean, going from being, an FCA person who went to Templemore to the barracks to shoot 303s and the likes of that to being, I suppose, exposed to a mass amount of weapons over here, it was certainly a bit of a shock, all right, that's for sure.
And was it something that came into your mind, or was there that kind of almost patriotic sense of duty post 9/11 that you wanted to do more to sort of serve and protect your community?
There was definitely a sense that I did want to protect the community, as you say, but there was also not so much a fear factor, but there was certainly a strong awareness of the fact that there were so many weapons around and so easily accessible. So I suppose a little bit of both, Ronan,
And do you think over the intervening years, has the level of gun ownership in the States, has it increased, or is it pretty much on a par with where it always might have been?
Oh, no, it's massively increased. And the main reason for that is, as mass shootings have increased around the United States, a lot of the conservative and Republican supporters would have the fear of the fact that the government would step in and either ban weapons that are currently available to them to purchase legally or illegally, or to remove some from the list or go after gun owners as such. So because of that, a lot of the population in the US have been basically stockholding a great deal of weapons and ammunition, to the point where there was actually a shortage of ammunition for law enforcement to purchase.
Wow. Because those stats from during the week that the Irish Times published, they do indicate that whilst maybe people in the past might have owned a firearm maybe for their own protection or sense of security, it seems now that most people own considerably more than one firearm.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, the biggest threat, if you get some of these, especially when you look at MAGA and major Trump supporters, is that they're very fearful that their weapons are going to be taken if Democrats get into power, or, with the laws that Biden changed on ban on assault weapons, on extended magazine loads, on bump stocks, stuff like that. So they're very, very aware of the fact that Big Brother can step in and take away their rights, so to speak. So there's a huge fear there, and weapons have gone. If you look at the amount of crimes that have been committed in the States, like the US is about 26%. Greater than any other country in the world for gun crimes, for firearm crimes. So the whole, I suppose, point of if everyone was armed, crime would decrease is debunked by that fact, that more guns don't decrease crime.
And even the events last week with presidential nominee Donald Trump if it was Joe Biden that suffered that attack, you could almost imagine the Democrats coming out calling for more gun control, for banning assault rifles. The opposite seems to be happening, though. It nearly would suggest that people are probably, let's get more guns to make sure that we are ready to protect and serve when that time comes.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you look at it, every state varies, Ronan. When you look at it throughout the United States, the most lax state in the United States regarding gun laws is New Hampshire. And ironically, they have one of the lowest crime rates for gun crimes. The worst states for gun crimes will be Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama. And they also have very lax gun laws. The issue is, like, if you look at where former President Trump was his in Pennsylvania, they've very, very lax gun laws. And, the norm around the country is that if you're 18 years of age, if you have a driver's license, and if you have some form of utility bill, whether it's a phone bill or electric bill in your name, that matches your driver's license, you can go in and you can buy a shotgun or a rifle. It isn't until the age of 21 that you can go in and buy a handgun in a lot of these states. As I said, it's varied state by state, but federally, that's generally the law.
And it's all
when you go, sorry, go ahead, Ron.
No, I just saw a graphic there on the BBC website yesterday, and they were showing the number of states that say have banned assault rifles. I think it's about 4 or 5 on the sort of east and west coast in total, and there's a number of states that have certain measures of control around it, but the vast majority, it's pretty much a free for all.
Yeah, it's about totally with somewhat of a control over. There's about 10 states, including Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. So it's really sad. I mean, because you look at it, the ease of access of the weapons. Basically, you go into a gun shop in America and you provide them with your license and your utility bill. And within 10 minutes, you're walking out of there with a weapon. If you're over 21, any weapon. And that's because you have to be a federally licensed firearms dealer in order to sell weapons. And the loophole in that was that at gun shows, these massive gun shows, they used to have, it'd be like going to, the O2 or somewhere, or Croke Park, and they have a massive gun show on, and half the country comes up to buy weapons. And the loophole was there that gun show sellers didn't have to do background checks. So the local state and the FBI have basically a computer database in each of these shops where when a customer comes in to buy a weapon and they hand over their ID, the person selling the weapon in that shop will run that person, and within 10 minutes they can walk out with a gun and with ammunition, and they must wait 30 more days before they can buy another weapon. But there's basically no restrictions on the style of weapon, with the exception of, a lot of them would be semi-automatic militia style weapons would not be allowed. Military style weapons, would not be allowed sold,
And where you're stationed and based there in Washington, D.C., then, what's the kind of the rules and laws around, say, carrying a weapon in public or that? You'd see images from Tel Aviv in Israel where, people are on standby and they're going around with assault rifles on their backs. But in Washington, D.C., do weapons have to be concealed? Do they have to be confined to the home? Or can people actually wear them in public?
We've one of the strictest laws in the United States in Washington, D.C. in regards to firearms. And basically, the only way you can have a firearm is if you apply for a license, which would be similar to Ireland. And you would have to be either a business owner or someone who has a proven threat to yourself as the reason why you have to have a firearm. In localing states, Virginia and Maryland, which surround DC, for instance, Virginia has a very lax gun law, and they have two kinds. You can have what they call an open carry, which, as you say, like in Tel Aviv and the likes, you can walk around the town, with the exception of a courthouse, a church, a school's ground. You can walk around with a rifle on your back and a handgun on your waist, and no one can question you. Now they have what they call a concealed carry weapon, a CCW. So that allows you, that's the only time in the state of Virginia that you actually have to have a license. So you would go to a courthouse and fill out an application and say that you've taken a gun safety course, and that a judge will basically sign it, and within 45 days, unless you have a felony, a charge against you, or you were or there's a mental behavior issue that has been lodged against you, then you will receive your concealed carry weapon, which you have to renew every 5 years.
And I assume from an administrative point of view as well, like the fact that those guns enter society in the first place is probably very hard for people to administer and keep a track on where those guns go. But I'm going to bring into the conversation a local police officer, Sergeant Graham Kavanagh. He's a crime prevention officer for Laois and Offaly. Graham, Mark has spoken there even around kind of controls and licensing laws and stuff like that as well. And figures available suggest that around 4,500 legally owned firearms are currently in Laois, Offaly and Westmeath. Typically, what are they being used for or held for?
So typically farming, you have people involved in games, going firing ranges. So the main thing for us in Ireland is that we're nowhere near our colleagues in America. We all, and I speak about all as in ourselves in Garda Síochána and people that are registered firearms holder, take the security and safety of firearms seriously. I carried for 10 years myself, so I know the responsibility of carrying a firearm, a sidearm. I've also lost a couple of colleagues through violent gun crime. And part of my role as a crime prevention officer is to visit, not everybody, but visit a good number of firearms, registered firearms holders and also firearms dealers. And I haven't come across anybody yet that doesn't take the storage and security of their firearms 100%. It also depends on the number of firearms you have, but unfortunately in Ireland what we do see gun crime. The bulk of the firearms are coming in through drugs shipments. So we saw a seizure there in County Louth yesterday. On occasion we do have burglaries where firearms are taken and they sometimes are used in shootings, and then we discover, we get a seizure and we get a firearm back and we find it was taken in a burglary. So that's part of what we do as crime prevention officers, is just to visit you and make sure that you are securing them. You probably think you're doing a great job, but it's just to reduce the I suppose, increase the amount of time it takes for somebody to take them, and securing the safe properly and making sure the alarm is monitored, making sure that the ammunition is secured separately. And I suppose overall, holistically, the property that's been stored in is secure. And
an anniversary of sorts for yourself on Friday there. You were in 19th July 1996, you actually completed your Garda training. Has the way Gardaí are trained now, say particularly around things like guns or firearms, has that changed drastically, say from 1996 right up to now? Yeah, it has. I carried a 6-shooter, a Smith & Wesson. It's all 6 hours now. The bulk of my colleagues are carrying that are carrying. Very much human rights. That's the big thing about carrying a gun. It's a responsibility that if you discharge a firearm, you have to be able to justify what you did, your actions. But at the end of the day, in our day-to-day work, it's a whole process of de-escalation, but also then the cycle of using non-lethal force. So whether it's the pepper spray or the baton or just talking or listening to somebody and de-escalating the situation, we on occasion have to use the firearm, and they sometimes end in tragedy. Nobody wants that. But by far and wide, like as you said yourself, the number of firearms in Ireland is nothing like what it is in the US. But every day we meet these people, they're living in our communities. Some of us are firearms holders ourselves in the Guards. Everybody doesn't want the firearm that they have to be involved in a tragedy or to be stolen, so they take that seriously. And I suppose for people in Laois, Offaly, Westmeath and the country in general, it's to watch those kind of licensing statistics, and I'm sure if that's been computed, if you see a significant rise, or the Gardaí can track that to ensure, like, we're a long way away from ever being what's happening in the States. And I suppose the question, I go back to Mark now as well, is maybe can the existing levels be controlled, or indeed could people start, dare I say, decommissioning, to use a word familiar with people in Ireland, decommissioning weapons and try and revert to a more kind of a human-focused society?
I really cannot see the US stepping back from gaining more arms. I think it's going to be an onward escalation. And I think the issue is that when you look at what happened to Trump in Pennsylvania, a lot of his supporters and a lot of people who are on the fence whether support him or not are more, this is the reason we need to arm ourselves, because you have, in their words, people who have got, maybe they're mentally unstable and they're a risk to our neighbourhood, to our families. So we have programs even in the police department in Washington, D.C., Metropolitan Police, which I'm a member of, we've had buyback programs where we offer money, gift cards, where there's no questions asked. We'll have these days, they're like field days where people come into halls at non-police stations, public areas where we would set up and go, you bring in your gun, we'll give you a gift certificate or cash for that weapon, no questions asked. And we've recovered some weapons, but it's generally not the people who are out there committing crimes who are handing in the weapons, so unfortunately it's a tough battle.
Yeah, wow, it's amazing. I suppose Graham was going to ask you, any chance you'd come back and bring your expertise to Garda Síochána back here in Ireland?
I actually do plan on moving back home because the States has its wear on me. So the plan in the very near future is to move back home again, yeah.
No, but look, Mark, we'll invite you to Midlands 103 and we'll get your in-depth story from you. But for now, Mark Kirwan, Metropolitan Police Officer in Washington DC, thank you so much for that this morning. And I doubt you're going back to bed anyway.
No, Ronan, I'm up now. Thanks very much.
Job.
And I love your station. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Mark. Thank you. That's Mark from Roscrader, police officer in Washington as well. It really kind of paints a picture. And going, as Mark says there, Graham, States can grate on you eventually, and it's a different society altogether. Very final word from yourself.
Yeah, we're all watching what's going on in the media, but I suppose the real message from me and from what we're doing is that reassurance to people in general in Ireland that, yeah, we have people in our communities that are registered firearms holders, but they're no threat to you. And if we do see issues, and occasionally we do come across them, we deal with them.
Yeah, that's it. And again, I say, we look at the levels in Laois Offaly, Westmeath and Ireland in general versus the States, we are nowhere near it. And let's sincerely hope we never, ever get there. I don't think we will, but who knows? We follow the Americans in so many things. Let's hope this isn't one of them. Graham, as always, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in this morning as well. Time for a very quick break. After that, how you can access leader funding in County Laois.
Saturday View on Midlands 103 with thanks to Lumcloon Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LumcloonEnergy.com.
Laois Partnership Company was delighted to announce the launch of the new Leader programme for 2023 to 2027. The official launch took place on Wednesday the 10th of July, and there is a decent pot of money that can make a real difference in our communities. If you want an example, Helen G of the fabulous G's Gourmet Jam and Abbey Foods was on with me on the business show last Tuesday evening, and she actually paid quick tribute to the role that Leader funding played in them developing their business.
Leader funding came into play, and as strange as it may seem, Ronan, I was at the launch of the Laois Leader funding the other night, over 4 million coming into Laois, and it's great to see the money. And it's a huge incentive, and it really, that was the ground where we started, and it was, slowly, step on step, all the way up.
And it's quite apparent where G's have got to at this stage with over 26 employees and still very much expanding and growing and increasing their offering and the quality output as well. But Brian Kelly, the Rural Development Programmes Manager for Laois Partnership Company, joins me now. Brian, a big pot of money, and Helen is very much an advocate for Leader funding. Can you take us through the size of the fund and what it can be put to use for?
Good morning, Ronan, and lovely to speak to you this morning, and very nice to hear that quote there from Helen G as well from during the week. And yeah, we launched the new Leader programme for County Laois last week. We had a really good launch on Wednesday evening, really good turnout and great interest in the programme. And then we had an online launch on the Thursday as well, and very good turnout at that. So yes, you're absolutely, as you said there's over 4 million allocated to County Laois to go directly into projects, into rural development projects across the county. We have up until the end of 2027 to allocate this new programme, and the funding is being allocated under 3 themes. So they're economic development and job creation, rural infrastructure and social inclusion, and sustainable development of the rural environment. Now that listeners will probably think that sounds very broad, but they're broken into a number of sub-themes. But really, Leader, it's all about, it's a bottom-up process. It's about individuals and communities coming together to see what's needed from an economic and a social point of view within their area, and developing projects really from grassroots level upwards. So we can fund small to medium-sized enterprises. We can fund community projects, environment projects, social inclusion projects, and it's quite a broad program. Also, climate change mitigation projects. So, any individuals or businesses or community groups that have an idea, even if it's just a vague idea, or you may have an existing project, or just be thinking about starting up a project, I'd encourage you to get in touch with us at Laois Partnership Company.
And I'm sure crucially Laois Partnership will assist people with that application process, which can be a bit of an off-put for some people when it comes to funding, but an organisation like yourself, I'm sure, can steer people through that based on your own experience of doing it over the years.
Absolutely, Ronan. We have development officers who are experienced leader development officers, and they will work with individuals and businesses and community groups in putting together the application. So it's not, it's not a scenario where we just issue an application form and say, come back when you have everything ready and we'll tell you if it's correct or not. We'll actually work with people right through the process, even just from when they have an initial idea, right through the whole process to pulling together their application, getting the project to approval stage. And we also stick with them when they're delivering the project as well during that process, because that's an important process as well, to make sure that the project is delivered and that the funding is drawn down and that the project is completed and that it's a good, sustainable, viable project for County Laois. So we stick with them the whole way through the process. So there is very, very good support available.
And the fund is now open. So for somebody who would like to get involved or like to at least start an idea or flesh out that idea, how can they do so?
Yep, so contact us at the Leader programme. So the email address is leader@laoispartnership.ie. We're also on social media as well. You'll find Laois Partnership Company on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook. And you can phone us as well at our head office in Portlaoise. So the number for that is, it's 057 866 1900. And we've also just launched our new website during the week as well. So that's laoispartnership.ie. So there's lots of information on there as well. So numerous ways there that people can get in touch with us. But we definitely would love
and
to
that
hear
website loaded with case studies and examples as well. G's been probably a huge standout, but it's an example of what can happen when you start working an idea. You've got the support from somebody like Laois Partnership Company as well. Huge opportunities. Brian Kelly, thank you so much for that this morning, and hopefully the applications begin flooding in for you as well. So there you go. There's the opportunity that these things like Leader Fund can provide for you, or for your idea, for a project that will create jobs in your area, for social inclusion projects, or as Brian says, they're environmental projects too. You've got all the contact details. What are you waiting for? Get up and start applying if you're in County Laois for that. That is bringing me to a close of our Saturday View this morning. Thank you for all your texts as well. Regarding the learner drivers, some people saying it's not always learners. Some older drivers need to change their habits. That's fine. We weren't trying to, pigeonhole one. We were just going on the basis that the stats we had were the ones released around learner drivers and fatal accidents last year as well. Speeding keeps coming up. Somebody suggested there should be a minimum fine of €1,500 if you're caught looking at or using your mobile phone. I would really say it should be more. It should be maybe a month off the road. That would certainly soften people's coughs a little bit too. So again, we're seeing the same things, the same ideas: speed and attitude, behaviour. Why are we in such a hurry? But the big question is, what are we all going to do about it as well? And say big thanks to Mark Kirwan coming to us live all the way from Washington DC. He's a police officer over there, and to Graham Kavanagh, just talking about gun ownership in Ireland. Like, we will never get to that level in this country, but let's not even get any higher than we have at the minute. And Graham pointed out the typical uses for firearms in this country, all very much above board. People are very compliant. When it comes to legally held firearms anyway. Let's hope we never go there. Let's all make sure that happens. We can take action on that. And then you just heard about Leader funding. If you have a project in Laois, get involved. Tony Cropwell's here next. Talk to you next Saturday.
Thanks to Lumclean Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. Lumcleanenergy.com.